I want to start with something that happened to my coworker Demarus about 18 months ago because it is one of the most satisfying real-life examples of this energy that I have ever had a front row seat to, and I have been waiting for the right reading to tell this story in. Demarus is a graphic designer, exceptionally good at what she does. The kind of person whose work has a specific signature quality to it that clients recognize and request specifically. She had been freelancing for several years, and during that period, she had a long-standing client relationship with a small creative agency run by a man named Prescott. Prescott was one of those people who had built his entire professional identity around the belief that he had an eye for talent. He loved discovering people before they were widely recognized. He loved being the person who gave someone their first significant opportunity. What he was less good at was what happened after the discovery, the part where you actually treat the talented person as though their talent has ongoing value, rather than as though the value was in the discovery and the discovered thing is now just inventory. Demarus had been working with Prescott's agency for almost 2 years when the dynamic started showing its real shape. The payments started coming later. The feedback started having a quality of casual dismissiveness that had not been there at the beginning. And most tellingly, Prescott started making comments, small ones, not flagrant. The kind that people with his particular type of ego make when they have gotten comfortable enough to stop managing their contempt that suggested he viewed her as easily substitutable. One comment in particular stuck with her. They were in a review meeting, and he said, about a piece she had delivered that she was genuinely proud of, that any competent designer could have produced this. Any competent designer. Demarus did not respond to that comment in the meeting. She finished the meeting professionally. She went home. She sat with what she had heard. And then she made a decision that was clean and clear and completely without drama. She wrapped up her current projects, delivered everything to standard, sent a professional and warm termination of the working relationship, and redirected every hour she had been spending on Prescott's agency toward building something of her own. Within 4 months, she had landed 3 new clients independently. All of them better than Prescott in every measurable way. And within 6 months, one of her pieces went moderately viral in design community spaces, and her profile in her field shifted noticeably. Prescott watched all of this happen. From the outside. From the specific uncomfortable vantage point of someone who had let go of something and was now watching that something flourish in the space he no longer occupied. Demarus told me about the messages. They started about 5 months after she had left. Not immediately, there had been a period of performed indifference that she assumed was happening, even though she was not seeing it directly. And then the messages started. Professional in framing, but clearly not professional in motivation. Could we reconnect about potential collaboration? I have been thinking about the work we did together. There is a project coming up that made me think of you specifically. From the man who had said any competent designer could have produced this. She showed me the last one. Sent at 2:49 in the morning. It was longer than the others. It had a quality to it that the earlier ones had not had. Something that was not quite an apology, but was clearly trying to be adjacent to one without quite having the courage to be the actual thing. Something that was trying to communicate a revised assessment of her value while maintaining just enough dignity to avoid being a complete capitulation. She read it to me, and then looked up and said 2 words. The audacity. And then she smiled, not with cruelty, with the specific satisfaction of someone who knew their worth before anyone confirmed it and is simply watching confirmation arrive on its own schedule. The audacity. That is this reading. Let us get into these cards because Spirit has a lot to say. Card 1, Justice, the scales have corrected and the correction is not comfortable for them. Justice lands first. And I want you to understand something about this card in this specific position because it is not abstract and it is not distant. Justice in the first position of this reading is Spirit saying the correction has already happened. Not is happening, has happened. The scales that were imbalanced by someone's incorrect assessment of your value have already corrected. The correction is complete. And what you are watching now, the 3am messages, the secret planning, the audacity of their revised approach is the observable consequence of a correction that was always going to happen, because incorrect assessments of real value are always eventually corrected by reality. Here is what I mean by that more specifically. Justice is not a card of punishment. People misread justice as punishment all the time, and that is not what this card is. Justice is simply correction. The return to accurate accounting. The moment when the ledger that has been running incorrect numbers gets audited by reality and the correct numbers are entered. And the correct numbers in your case are the ones that have always been true. Your value, your specific and irreplaceable quality. The thing that any competent person cannot replicate because the thing was never your competence in isolation. It was the combination of your competence and your character and your specific way of being that existed in the dynamic between you. And reality audited. And the audit produced numbers that were significantly different from what this person had been calculating. And they are now living in the aftermath of the audit with the specific discomfort of someone who based major decisions on incorrect calculations and is now looking at what the correct calculations produce. Practical example for justice in this position, there is a man named Evander. And Evander had been in a personal relationship where someone he cared about had made a very clear assessment through action rather than words, which is always the more honest form of assessment that he was not their priority. That other options and other people and other considerations ranked higher in their actual lived decision-making than he did. And Evander had internalized this assessment to a degree that affected how he moved in the dynamic. He accommodated. He waited. He organized himself around a person who was not organizing themselves around him. And then Evander did something that was less about strategy and more about finally having reached the limit of what his self-respect could sustain. He stopped. He redirected. He made himself genuinely unavailable in the way that people who have stopped waiting become genuinely unavailable. And he invested the energy he had been spending on this person into directions that were actually returning something. Justice arrived for the other person in the form of the specific and rude awakening that comes when you have been incorrectly calculating someone as a reliable fixture, and that fixture is suddenly genuinely not there. And the recalculation that reality forced was uncomfortable in direct proportion to how incorrect the original calculation had been. The more they had underestimated Evander's value, the more uncomfortable the correction was. And they had underestimated significantly. That is your justice card. The correction is not coming. It has arrived. And what you are watching is someone living inside the discomfort of having had their numbers corrected by reality. And that discomfort is producing the 3am energy, the secret planning, the audacity that is incoming. Card 2, 8 of Pentacles reversed. They tried to replace what you brought. And discovered it cannot be replicated. 8 of Pentacles reversed comes in second. And this card is specifically about the mechanism by which the justice correction was delivered. Because the correction did not come from you saying anything. It did not come from confrontation or from argument or from proving something directly. It came from them attempting to do what they told themselves they could do, find a replacement, and discovering through the attempt that the thing they were trying to replace was not replaceable. The Eight of Pentacles upright is skill development. Practice, the building of craft through dedicated application. Reversed in your reading, it is the failed attempt to replicate through substitution something that was not a skill, but a specific and singular quality. You cannot practice your way into being a specific person. You cannot find someone who will perform the function of an irreplaceable thing. You can find someone who is competent. You can find someone who is even excellent in measurable ways. But you cannot find someone who is what you are, because what you are is not a function. It is you. And this person went looking. After calling you replaceable and acting on that assessment by letting you go or pushing you away or treating you as though the door was revolving, they went looking. They found some version of what they were looking for on the surface, maybe more than one version. And they discovered in each encounter the specific quality of gap that your absence had left that was not being filled. Not because the replacements were inadequate by any objective standard, because the gap was U-shaped, and U-shaped gaps do not get filled by things that are not you. Here is the example for this card that is so specific, it might feel personal. There is a woman named Tatiana. And Tatiana had left a professional partnership where her contributions had been consistently undervalued and occasionally explicitly dismissed. The partner, a man named Conrad, had at various points indicated that her specific role in their work could be handled by any number of qualified people. Had made hiring decisions that seemed designed to demonstrate this point. Had treated her as a category rather than as an irreplaceable individual. Tatiana left. Conrad hired. Multiple times. And each person he hired was competent. One of them was objectively impressive on paper. But something about the work kept not landing the way it had when Tatiana was there. Something about the client relationships felt thinner. Something about the internal culture of the partnership felt less cohesive. And Conrad spent a significant amount of time and money before he was willing to admit to himself what was producing the gap. It was Tatiana. Specifically, not her category. Her, the way she thought about problems. The specific quality of how she held relationships. The thing she brought that he had dismissed as replaceable because he had confused the category she occupied with the person who occupied it. And the Eight of Pentacles, reversed, is the failure of every attempt to fill the category with someone else, while the person who had been in it was building something extraordinary with the energy she had redirected. Your Eight of Pentacles, reversed, is their failure to replace you. The discovery that what they had was not a category. It was you. And you are not available for replacement by definition. Card 3, the Hermit reversed, they have been in their private reckoning, a end. It has produced something O. The Hermit reversed arrives third, and this is the card that takes us directly into the 3am space of your title. Because the Hermit upright is someone who has deliberately gone within, who has chosen solitude and introspection for the purpose of finding something important in the quiet. Reversed, the solitude has been involuntary. The introspection has not been chosen. It has been forced by the specific, unbearable quality of quiet that arrives when you have acted on an incorrect assessment and are now alone with the results. And in that forced solitude, something has happened. Something has been confronted that the noise of daylight and performance and social life had been successfully avoiding. The Hermit reversed is not peaceful reflection. It is the specific, uncomfortable reckoning of someone who cannot sleep at 3, and because the thoughts that arrive in the absence of distraction are not ones they can manage or redirect or perform their way out of. In those forced solitary hours, they have arrived at a specific place of knowing that they were wrong, of understanding what they let go of and what they treated carelessly and what they called replaceable and what turned out to be singular. And the arriving at that place, the unwilling, forced, sleepless reckoning with the actual truth has produced something. A decision. A plan. The audacious thing that is about to happen. Practical example for the hermit reversed. Think about a man named Cornelius. And Cornelius had a very functional social life that served, among other things, the purpose of keeping him sufficiently distracted from things he was not ready to examine. He was not consciously using his social life as avoidance. He just happened to be someone who was almost never alone in the unoccupied way that forces self-examination. And this had served him reasonably well because the things he was not examining were not things that were causing immediate visible problems. And then a particular ending happened that stripped away the buffer. For reasons that had to do with the specific nature of what it ended and what it had meant to his daily life, Cornelius suddenly found himself with significantly more unoccupied quiet than he was accustomed to. And in that quiet, the things he had not been examining arrived and sat down and declined to leave. The 3 a.m. text he eventually sent was the direct product of 3 weeks of that forced examination, of sitting alone with the truth of what he had done and what he had called disposable and what reality had corrected him about in the specific expensive way that reality corrects incorrect assessments. And what came out of those 3 weeks in the hermit reversed space was not just feeling. It was a plan. Because Cornelius, who was someone who solved things when he was finally willing to look at them directly, had spent 3 weeks in the forced quiet, arriving at what he was going to do about it. That plan is what Spirit is calling audacious in your title. And audacious is the right word. Because the audacity of someone who called you replaceable, now planning to approach you with a revised assessment, is real. And it is incoming. Card 4, King of Cups, what they are planning to bring you, is the most emotionally honest thing they have ever prepared. King of Cups arrives 4th, and this card is doing something very specific in this reading. Because the King of Cups is emotional mastery. Emotional intelligence, the capacity to feel deeply and express what is felt with a quality of maturity and considered honesty that is different from raw emotional outpouring. And what Spirit is showing me with this card in this position is that whatever this person is planning, the audacious thing that is coming, they have brought their full emotional intelligence to bear on preparing it. This is not a desperate, impulsive reach out. This is not a 3 a.m. text sent in the unguarded moment before they could stop themselves, though those have happened too. What is actually being planned is something more considered, something they have thought about carefully, something that is designed to communicate at a level of genuine honesty and emotional depth that they have not previously been willing to bring to the space between you. Because here is what the King of Cups planning reveals. The emotional depth was always there. They were always capable of it. What has changed is the willingness to bring it, to make it visible, to stop keeping their deepest and most genuine feelings in the managed interior and start letting them become something you can actually receive. And the 3M reckoning of the hermit reversed is what produced that willingness. When you have finally run out of comfortable alternatives, you discover that the honest option was available the whole time. Practical example for the King of Cups in this context. There is a woman named Meredith, and the man who had called her replaceable through his actions was not an emotionally unintelligent person. That was actually part of what made the experience so confusing for Meredith during the relationship. She had seen evidence of his capacity for emotional depth, had caught glimpses of what he was capable of when he let something through. And those glimpses had made the broader withholding harder to understand. And then, in the planning in the King of Cups, preparation for whatever he was going to do, he brought everything. All of the emotional intelligence he had been rationing and managing and deploying selectively, he put it all into what he prepared. And when it arrived, Meredith said the thing that struck her most was not that he had said it, but that he had clearly meant every word of it at the deepest level. That there was no performance in it. That the King of Cups version of him, the one capable of full, genuine emotional honesty, had finally shown up completely rather than in the managed glimpses she had been given. She said, "I knew he had this in him. I saw it sometimes. I just did not know he was going to bring all of it at once. All of it at once. That is what is coming." The King of Cups version of someone who previously rationed themselves. Bring all of it at once. Card 5, the chariot, they are moving toward you with the specific determination of someone who has nothing left to lose. By being honest, the chariot arrives 5th, and this card, after everything that has been building, is spirit confirming that the movement is not tentative, not cautious, not testing the waters with small gestures that can be walked back if they do not land well. The chariot is committed forward movement, focused will. The specific energy of someone who has made a decision and is executing it without the hedging and the managing and the leaving of escape routes that characterized how they operated before the reckoning. And what has changed between how they operated before and how they are operating now is exactly what the title describes. They called you replaceable. They operated from that incorrect assessment. They discovered through the 8 of Pentacles reversed experience of trying to replace you that the assessment was wrong. They went through the hermit reversed reckoning alone in the sleepless 3M dark. They prepared the King of Cups offering. And now the chariot is moving, with the specific determination of someone who has burned through every comfortable option and is left with only the honest one. People who have nothing left to lose by being honest move differently from people who are still protecting their pride. They move faster. They move more directly. They move without the elaborate positioning and strategic indirection that pride requires. And this person has been stripped of enough pride by the reckoning that what remains is just the movement toward you with what they have, without the protective distance they normally keep. Example for the chariot. There is a man named Stellan. And Stellan had been someone who operated with a very careful quality of strategic indirection in his personal life. He never said things that could not be walked back. Never made moves that could not be framed as something other than what they were if they did not land well. He kept exits available at all times. It was not malicious. It was the specific self-protection of someone who had been hurt enough to have developed a comprehensive system for minimizing future exposure. And then the reckoning happened. And the reckoning cost him enough, cost him the comfort of his own story about having options, cost him the months of failed replacement attempts, cost him the sleepless nights of the hermit reversed, that when he finally decided to move toward the person he had let go, he moved without exits. Without the strategic indirection. Without the framing that could be walked back. He said exactly what he meant, in exactly the way he meant it, with no way to retreat from it if it did not land well. And the person on the receiving end said later that what they had felt from him in that moment was something they had never felt from him before. Not because the feeling was new, but because it was fully visible for the first time. Without the exits, without the framing, just him. Moving toward what he wanted, with the chariot determination of someone who had finally gotten honest enough to be dangerous. That is what is coming for you. The version of this person without exits. Moving toward you with everything they have finally decided to stop protecting from you. Card 6, Wheel of Fortune, the timing of what is coming, is divinely organized. A&D cannot be stopped. Wheel of Fortune arrives 6th. And this card, as the penultimate card in your reading, is Spirit putting cosmic signature on what has been building. Because the Wheel of Fortune is not about individual choices or personal timelines or the decisions of any particular person involved. It is about the specific turn of cosmic energy that organizes circumstances in such a way that what was always going to happen, eventually, the correction, the approach, the audacious move happens now. At this specific moment. In this specific window. And the wheel turning does not ask for anyone's readiness. It does not wait for convenient timing. It turns because it is the nature of wheels to turn, and because the specific combination of energy and circumstances and accumulated consequence that has been building in this situation has now reached the turning point. And turning points turn. What Spirit is saying with the wheel in your reading is that the arrival of what this person is planning is not being organized by their timeline or their readiness or their strategic calculation of optimal moment. It is being organized by the turn, by the cosmic organizing principle that delivers the correction at the moment it is meant to be delivered. And the moment is now. Or it is so close to now that the distinction barely matters. The wheel also carries a message about your own position in this turn. Because the wheel does not only move things toward you, it also creates the conditions for you to receive them from your best position. And what your best position looks like in this turn is exactly what Spirit has been building toward throughout this reading. You in your sun position. You with correct information about your own value. You without the wounded pride that might receive this from a reactive place, rather than from the clear and settled place of someone who knew what they were worth before any of this started and knows it still. The turn is organized. The timing is divine. And what is coming is arriving exactly when it is meant to arrive for both of you. Card 7, the Sun, UARE, being vindicated in the most visible and undeniable way, and the final card, the Sun, landing at the close of a reading that started with someone calling you replaceable. The Sun as the closing card is Spirit delivering the most unambiguous possible statement about how this ends and where you are. The Sun is not subtle. It does not imply or suggest or leave room for interpretation. It simply shines with the full brightness of something that is completely and permanently true. And what it is shining on in the close of your reading is your vindication, not as a revenge narrative, not as a you were right and they were wrong narrative in the petty sense. As the simple, undeniable, requires no announcement truth of what was always the case being brought fully into the light. You were never replaceable. Not for a moment. Not by any measure that actually mattered. The assessment that called you replaceable was incorrect the moment it was formed. And the Sun is not announcing this as new information, it is illuminating it as the truth that was always there, that was always true, that no one's assessment of it ever had the power to change. Here is the final practical example for the Sun in this position. Demarus, my coworker, whose story opened this reading, did something when Prescott's 2:49 a.m. message arrived that I want to tell you about. She did not respond immediately. She did not respond from the reactive place of someone who had been waiting for this moment. She sat with the message for 3 days. And then she wrote a response that was professional and warm and completely clear about the terms she was now operating on, which were her terms, not his. She told me afterward that what the whole experience had given her was a very specific and very permanent piece of clarity about her own value that she said she would not have had without going through it. Not because the going through it had been pleasant, but because there is a specific quality of knowing your value that only comes from watching someone who called it into question be corrected by reality in front of you. From watching the 3 a.m. messages arrive, from watching the audacious planning become visible, from watching the person who said any competent person could have produced this spend several months discovering that no other competent person was producing what she had produced. She said I knew what I was worth before Prescott said what he said. But I know it differently now. I know it with evidence. I know it with the specific and permanent knowledge that comes from having been tested. And the knowing with evidence is better than the knowing without it. Because the knowing without it can be talked out of. The knowing with it cannot. The knowing with evidence cannot be talked out of. That is the sun. That is your closing card. The vindication that is happening is not only for the people watching from outside, it is for you. It is the specific and permanent and evidence-based knowing of your own value that you carry forward from this moment, regardless of what you decide to do with what is coming. What spirit wants to leave you with the final word, several things before this closes, and every single one of them is important. The first, the 3M begging is a symptom, not a solution. What it tells you is that the correction has happened and is real. What it does not tell you is what the right response is. Receive it as information. Do not confuse the arrival of their revised assessment with the arrival of a decision you have to make. Those are separate things on separate timelines, and you get to hold that boundary. The second, the audacity of what they are planning deserves to be received with your full presence and your full clarity. Not your wounded pride responding to their wounded pride. Your actual self, the one that knew its value before any of this happened, receiving what is being offered and evaluating it from that grounded place. Pride-to-pride interactions produce noise. Self-to-self interactions produce something real. Aim for the second one. The third, whatever they bring, however audacious, however King of Cups honest, however chariot determined you, are allowed to take time. You are not on their timeline. The correction arrived on reality's timeline. Your response arrives on yours. Do not let the urgency of their reckoning become your urgency. Your pace, your terms, your clarity. The fourth, the vindication of the sun is real regardless of what you decide about the incoming approach. You do not need to accept what they are planning in order for the vindication to be complete. The vindication is in the correction itself, in the 3M messages, in the audacious planning, in the failed replacements, and the King of Cups honesty, and the chariot determination of someone who has run out of comfortable alternatives. All of that is the vindication. Your decision about what to do with it is a separate story. Fifth and final. The title of this reading, called You Replaceable in the Past Tense, and then describe the consequence of that past tense error, and the consequence is unfolding in real time around you. But the most important word in the title is not replaceable. It is not even audacity. The most important word is now. They called you replaceable then. And now is where you live. Now is where your value is undeniable and visible and operating at full sun brightness. Now is where the wheel has turned. Now is where what was always true has been confirmed by the most honest assessor available, which is reality itself. Now is yours. Do something extraordinary with it. I want to end where I began. With Demarus. In that office. On an ordinary afternoon, when she told me about the 2:49 a.m. message from a man who had once said any competent designer could have produced this, she had already written her response by the time she told me. She showed it to me. It was 4 sentences. Professional, warm, completely clear. And it ended with something that I want to leave with you as the final thought of this entire reading. She had written, "I appreciate you reaching out. I have given this genuine consideration. What I know now that I perhaps did not fully know before is that my best work happens when I am working with people who recognized its value before circumstances required them to. I wish you every success. What I know now that I perhaps did not fully know before is that my best work happens when I am working with people who recognized its value before circumstances required them to. Before circumstances required them to. That is the sentence. That is the whole reading. That is what you carry out of this. Not the vindication, though the vindication is real and is yours. Not the 3M messages, though they are arriving and the audacity of what is planned is real. The specific and settled and evidence-based clarity about what you deserve from people who are in your life, which is recognition that does not require reality to correct them into it. Appreciation that does not require your absence to become visible. Value that is acknowledged before circumstances make the acknowledgement unavoidable. You deserve that. You have always deserved that. And you know it with evidence now. Go act accordingly. Drop something in the comments if this reading landed. Tell me what card was the one that found you specifically. Subscribe so you are here for the next reading, and share this with someone who is called replaceable and is watching reality do its work. Because reality always does its work. On its own timeline, with its own kind of thoroughness. And the correction always arrives. It always arrives.